Hi, this is Robert's son Janice. I hope you will enjoy and learn much from this video I have made for you. It critiques the views of Mr. Trent Horn, who works as an apologist for Catholic answers. I don't do this to make any personal attack on Mr. Horn, but only to show that the views he teaches about cosmogony and cosmology are against the traditional doctrinal positions of the Catholic Church, and I do not want Catholics to be deceived. I should add that the larger fault on this particular topic lies with the founder of Catholic Answers, Mr. Carl Keating, who is against what he calls fundamentalism, that is, anyone who interprets the Bible literally or expects to get accurate historical or scientific information from it, whether they be Catholic or Protestant. That is why Mr. Keating's book is titled Catholicism and Fundamentalism, not Catholicism and Protestantism, since fundamentalism is a pejorative term used not only against Protestants, but anyone who holds to the traditional view of Scripture that teaches it is inspired and inerrant in all that it says, both in its soteriology and its history, and is to be interpreted literally unless reason or necessity prohibits it. The late Catholic priest and famous Bible scholar Father Raymond Brown used the same term, fundamentalism, against other Catholic priests of his day who maintained the traditional view of Scripture's plenary inspiration and inerrancy in the face of Father Brown's rejection of the same. Sadly, most of today's Catholics do not believe Scripture is inspired and inerrant in all it says. Ever since Vatican II, they have taught that Scripture is inspired and inerrant only when it teaches on salvation, which comes from their errant interpretation of Dei Verbum 11. Following this unorthodox teaching, Mr. Keating and Catholic Answers, including its present president, Christopher Check, has subsequently poisoned a whole generation of Catholics. This modern view of Scripture is ironic, of course, in light of the fact that historically, the Catholic Church has had the most fundamentalist group of exegetes the world has ever seen. For example, in passages such as Matthew 26:26, in which Jesus said, "Take, eat, this is my body," the Church did not hesitate to take Jesus' words literally and proclaim that he was present in the consecrated Eucharist, with his body, blood, soul, and divinity, whereas most Protestants interpret Jesus' words symbolically. So who really are the fundamentalists? Conversely, when it comes to passages like Genesis chapter 1, with all its painstaking detail in what is created and when, where, why, and how it is created, Keating loses all sense of literal interpretation and places his trust in popular scientific theories like evolution and the Big Bang, both of which have had much difficulty in recent years showing any semblance of scientific credibility and coherence. Following Keating, Mr. Horn does the same. After doing many previous critiques of Mr. Horn's teaching on cosmogony and cosmology, which are presently available on YouTube and which Mr. Horn refuses to view or comment on, our assessment is that, like his mentor, he is not an open-minded combatant seeking for truth, even though he presents himself as being open-minded and middle of the road. It wouldn't be so bad if Mr. Horn presented a good scholarly scientific case for his position, so as to convince his audience that he has thoroughly studied and deliberated on all the details. But he hasn't, not even close. This is why I say, in a satirical way, that Mr. Horn is not ready for prime time. To show proof of this, we will go through his video and demonstrate it to you. Here is episode 1 of 20 episodes, Trent Horn, not ready for prime time. Episode 1 is titled Evolution, the Big Bang, and Father Lemaître.
The problem is that while there are some things we can know with common sense, in many other cases we need data from specialists. Common sense can be misleading. In fact, in some cases, science helps Christians when non-religious people prefer what they think is common sense. Common sense might tell them that the universe is just a huge empty space that's always been here. But science points towards the beginning of the universe coming out of an expansion, the Big Bang, which was pioneered by the Belgian physicist Monseigneur Georges Lemaître. It was later derisively called the Big Bang Theory by critics who thought it was a case of religion intruding into science.
First, Mr. Horn continues to teach that Catholics are allowed to believe and accept evolution, and he continues to ignore or distort the scientific basis for geocentrism. Regarding evolution, Pope Pius XII made it clear in his 1950 encyclical, Humani Generis, paragraph 37, that no Catholic can believe or teach evolution unless he has a decisive and officially accepted answer to the problem of polygenism, which no Catholic has yet produced. We will address this point more thoroughly in one of our latter episodes. In this present episode, we will be dealing mainly with Mr. Horn's espousing of the Big Bang Theory as a fact of science. It is not by any stretch of the imagination, and Catholics or anyone who believes in it are being deceived. Here Mr. Horn is arguing that certain things cannot be solved by common sense, and thus needs data from science to guide us in the right direction and make the right conclusions. So far, so good. The problem is that Mr. Horn's use of the Big Bang Theory as an example of getting the right answer is quite self-serving, especially since the Big Bang is an unproven scientific theory that is presently riddled with so many problems. It's a wonder that anyone still holds to it today. When Edwin Hubble first invented the expanding universe, no one knew about the intractable problems it would incur down the road. For instance, in the early 80s, scientists realized that if the universe was going to expand and reach the size they believe it is today, it would not be able to do so if they put it under the constraints of Einstein's special relativity theory that limits the speed of light and gravity to 300,000 kilometers per second. At that slow speed, it would take the universe over 100 billion years to reach the desired goal, a far cry from the 13.8 billion years Big Bang enthusiasts hold today. So, what did the Big Bangers do to solve this problem? Did they go on a painstaking search to see if the Big Bang Theory might be wrong? No, just the opposite. They forced a new theory into the mix that claimed there was a super expansion, which they called inflation, in which the Big Bang expands 10 to the 26th power meters. In 10 to the minus 35 power seconds, a colossal event that is way beyond our comprehension. But how could they even start down that road? How could something so big just pop into existence, complete with all the material it would need to make a universe? Well, thanks to Einstein, there was another theory called general relativity that allowed light, gravity, and material objects to exceed special relativity's speed limit on light, gravity, and material objects. We will study this issue later in this video. There is a more important story to tell concerning the origin of the Big Bang Theory itself. Simply put, the Big Bang Theory was itself an ad hoc invention without any evidence or proof. In 1929, when Edwin Hubble was looking at the universe's galaxies, he noticed that every galaxy outside our local group had a redshift in its light spectrum. This was the moment of truth for Hubble, since he knew that such a ubiquitous redshift put the Earth, the observation point, in the center of the universe. If the Earth wasn't in the center, then Hubble would have seen as many blue shifts as red shifts. Stephen Hawking confirmed this in his famous book, A Brief History of Time. He writes, quote,
"At that time, most people expected the galaxies to be moving around quite randomly, and so expected to find as many blue-shifted spectra as red-shifted ones. It was quite a surprise, therefore, to find that most galaxies appeared red-shifted. Now at first sight, all this evidence that the universe looks the same, whichever direction we looked, might seem to suggest there is something special about our place in the universe. In particular, it might seem that if we observe all other galaxies to be moving away from us, then we must be at the center of the universe."
Hubble, 50 years earlier, said much the same as Hawking. Note these words, quote,
"Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. The hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would be accepted only as a last resort in order to save the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility and consider the alternative, namely, a distribution which thins out with distance. The unwelcome supposition of a favored location must be avoided at all costs.
So what does one do if he wants to save the world from having to believe in the ancient geocentric universe, but the evidence shows that it is indeed a geocentric universe? The solution is simple. One invents what he needs, whether there is any evidence or proof to back it up. After all, we are talking about big things here. The weal or woe of the world, for if the universe is geocentric, then Hubble and all his colleagues will need to kiss the feet of the Pope who first told Galileo that his non-geocentric universe was false and heretical. So, to keep Earth out of the center, Hubble had to come up with a non-centered explanation. The only way to do so, Hubble reasoned, was to eliminate a center altogether and put every galaxy, including the Milky Way in which the Earth resided, on the surface of a balloon-shaped universe that had no center. By analogy, if Hubble could make the universe into a balloon instead of a filled spherical ball, then the universe would have no center, only a surface. This could be accomplished, at least on paper, if they allowed themselves to dispense with Euclidean geometry and employ Riemann geometry, which deals in curves in 2 dimensions, rather than straight lines and 3 dimensions. In Hubble's new universe, the galaxies would be expanding away from each other as if they were dots on the surface of a balloon that was being inflated. Hubble explains how this universe would work and why he chose it on page 54 of his book, quote,
All observers, regardless of their location, will see the same general picture of the universe. If we see the nebulae all receding from our position in space, then every other observer, no matter where may be located, will see the nebulae all receding from his position. However, the assumption is adopted. There must be no favored location in the universe, no center, no boundary. All must see the universe alike. And in order to ensure this situation, the cosmologist postulates spatial isotropy and spatial homogeneity, which is his way of stating that the universe must be pretty much alike everywhere and in all directions.
Pay attention to Hubble's comment about spatial isotropy and spatial homogeneity, for it will become important later on in this video. In any case, in light of Hubble's comments, when people like Trent Horn start bragging about the Big Bang as if it dropped out of heaven, and that it is good because it gives us a beginning, as opposed to the eternity of the steady-state theory, he should tell people where the idea of a Big Bang originated. That is, from an atheist, Edwin Hubble, who actually saw in his telescope that the Earth was in the center of the universe but didn't like it and wanted to get rid of it, which means that Hubble was not an honest man of science, but a man who was determined to show the Bible was wrong so that he didn't have to bow to its God. That's the reality. But you'll never get that from an uneducated ideologue like Trent Horn. As we continue with the saga of the Big Bang Theory, the problems were not over for its scientists. Thus, the ad hoc inventions to prop up the Big Bang would come fast and furious in the following years. A few years after inflation was invented, in 1998, astronomers believed, based on their particular way of measuring starlight, that certain stars called 1A supernovas were telling them that the universe was not merely expanding, but it was accelerating in its expansion. Today, they believe the universe is expanding at 4 times the speed of light. The problem, which in 1929 Hubble and his colleagues never saw coming, was that if the universe is accelerating in its expansion, a great amount of energy would be needed to sustain the expansion. But when scientists looked into the universe for the needed energy, they couldn't find it. In fact, if they added up all the energy latent in the universe, there was only 5% of what was needed for an accelerated expansion. Another possibility was the energy discovered in the micro-universe of quantum mechanics. But unlike the 5% of energy in the macro-universe, the micro-universe had way too much energy for the accelerated expansion. In fact, it had 10 to the 120th power too much energy. So modern science was, as the proverbial saying goes, between a rock and a hard place. So, what does one do in desperate cases like this, knowing that kissing the feet of the Pope is the forbidden option? The scientist will make up the energy he needs without any evidence or proof that the energy actually exists. This is the way science is done today. It is the way the world works today. We don't wait for empirical evidence. Rather, the status quo narrative takes precedence over the truth. The narrative needs a big bang since there is no other place to go. Hubble made sure of that by forcing the balloon universe upon them. So, in order to convince people to accept that this needed energy really exists, the scientists depend on the fact that they wear white lab coats which demand respect. After all, the scientists can write long and arduous equations that show how it is all possible. Just like Hubble used the fancy mathematics of Bernard Riemann to make his balloon universe without a center and just a surface, dispensing with three-dimensional Euclidean geometry which had a center. The next thing he could do is give this ad hoc energy a mysterious name that the public would love and adore. They called it dark energy. They would then convince the public that it actually existed when they knew in truth that not a drop of it had yet been discovered. If anyone asked questions like, "So where is this dark energy?" they would politely tell them that it's out there somewhere and we will find it in due time. Meanwhile, the billions of dollars of grant money would still flow to these scientific institutions as they made the machines that would, with a lick and a promise, find the dark energy. But before they could start looking for the dark energy, another problem with the Big Bang universe cropped up. It was discovered in the late 1970s that spiral galaxies were rotating 10 times too fast for Newton's laws of motion, particularly the law that says force equals mass times acceleration, or F equals ma. This fast rotation also defied Einstein's tensor equation, G equal to 8 pi tau. If one uses Newton's F equals ma equation, then the m part of the equation has to be greatly increased. But where would they get the needed matter? Well, they would get it from the same place they got the dark energy. In other words, they would get it from thin air. Presto, the problem is solved. They simply invented the matter they needed to make the Big Bang universe survive another day. And in order to make it appear they were on the right track, they called this new matter dark matter, in order to match the dark energy they already invented. But like dark energy, they haven't found any dark matter, even though they have built billion-dollar machines to discover it. Incidentally, it would be pretty hard to detect, since if dark matter is already in spiral galaxies to make them rotate 10 times faster than normal, then obviously we can't see the dark matter, which means it doesn't reflect light or have a source of energy inside of it that we can detect with a spectrometer or any other device. How convenient for the scientists. So, if they have both dark energy and dark matter, then they both have to share space in the universe. And since there are a great number of galaxies in the universe, then the dark matter takes up a good amount of space, which then means that the dark energy cannot be at 100% occupancy. So, they divided it up so that the dark energy has 70% of the responsibility to push out the expanding universe, and dark matter has 25%, which leaves the 5% for the macro universe that we can see. And they call this science. If geocentrists were to propose such a cacophony of ad hoc theories, they would immediately be classed as fanatical crackpots. The interesting fact is that geocentrism doesn't have any of these problems because its universe is rotating, not expanding. In rotation, all that is needed for the energy source is one push from God, and the universe will rotate ad infinitum by its own angular momentum. And since a rotating universe is a non-inertial or accelerating frame, it precludes special relativity and its limitations from being applied to it. The geocentric universe only operates by general relativity, which allows it to rotate at superluminal speeds and allows light and gravity to travel way beyond the conventional speed of light. The problems weren't over for the Big Bangers. Earlier, we mentioned that today's scientists believe the universe is expanding at the rate of 4 times the speed of light. Well, if these same scientists believe that Einstein's special relativity still rules the universe, how can the universe expand 4 times Einstein's speed limit? Here is where more of the 3-card Monte game of modern cosmology continues. As we saw with the initial stage of the Big Bang, in which the expansion would go too slow to meet expectations, this problem led the scientists to invent inflation, that is, that the universe expanded 10 to the 26 power meters in 10 to the minus 35 power seconds. As you can surmise, they could only theorize this super rapid expansion if they had already decided to put special relativity on the shelf, at least for the time being. For it would come back into play once the inflation was over, since special relativity once again presently presides over the rest of the Copernican universe, at least the interior part that is not expanding. Yes, you heard that correctly. Big Bangers believe that only the outer edge of the universe is expanding, not the interior part. That's their answer to why we don't see the Earth or the galaxies or even yourself getting bigger and bigger. Somehow we are immune to the expansion that is said to be transpiring at 4 times the speed of light and accelerating every day. Remember, they are stuck in this mess of contradictions because Edwin Hubble invented the expanding universe back in 1929 because he wanted to get around the ubiquitous redshift that put the Earth in the center. So how did they allow the edge of the universe to expand but keep the interior non-expanding? Who knows, but they sure didn't use special relativity, since it doesn't allow matter to even go 1c, much less 4c. So they did the same thing that they did to fit in inflation. That is, they switched to Einstein's general relativity that allows light, gravity, and matter to go at any speed required by the relativistic frame that is chosen. So what we have with the Big Bang is not a coherent scientific theory of cosmogony. We have instead a hodgepodge of patchwork proposals hoping to prop up a theory that will forever seek to suppress the fact that the Earth is in the center of the universe. From inflation to dark energy to dark matter to arbitrary superluminal speeds, the Big Bang is nothing but the shattered dreams of scientists who desperately want to get God and the Bible off the stage by bombarding the public with all kinds of fancy theories and complicated equations. In reality, the only thing they were successful at doing was making themselves more guilty before God because they failed to keep and honor the first and obvious interpretation Hubble gave to the redshift, namely, that the Earth is in the center of the universe. As for Father Georges Lemaître, even though he is a Catholic priest, he is just as guilty as Hubble. After Lemaître saw Hubble's redshift data and accepted Hubble's conclusion that the universe was expanding, he then proposed that we use Einstein's field equations to reverse the process of expansion and see what we end up with when the balloon compresses, so to speak. This is what led to Father Lemaître's cosmic egg theory, which then led Catholics to attribute the Big Bang theory to Father Lemaître. Secular scientists, however, called Lemaître's egg a singularity, but not because they knew what it was, but because they didn't know what it was. Catholics were so proud of Father Lemaître because he helped develop a cosmogony that had a beginning, as opposed to the previously reigning steady-state theory that was infinite and had no beginning. So Catholic exegetes began equating Genesis's opening words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," with the Big Bang, and used the words, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light," as if it were the initial explosion of the Big Bang. This kind of interpretation, of course, requires one to ignore the details, context, and chronology of Genesis's opening words, such as the fact that the earth came with the heavens and before the light, which we find in the words, quote, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light," unquote. As such, the Big Bang makes a travesty of Holy Scripture. In the Big Bang theory, the earth doesn't come until 8 billion years after the light appears. In God's version, the earth comes before the light, and for good reason, since there is no need of light unless the earth is present. Father Lemaître is guilty of leading us down this primrose path because he knew that Hubble's redshift evidence could have been used to support the Bible's truth that the earth was in the center of the universe. As it stands, Einstein's field equations allow at least 2 possible universes. One possibility is an isotropic and homogeneous universe. Using Riemann two-dimensional geometry that pictured the universe as a balloon with no center, the Big Bang theory was an example of such an isotropic and homogeneous universe. Such a universe will appear the same from every direction, and thus it has no center or distinguishing point. Today, this model generally goes by the name of the Friedman-Robertson-Lemaître-Walker model, or for short, the FRLW model. But as we have seen, this model not only uses a highly unlikely theoretical geometry, it is riddled with mechanical problems from start to finish, problems that have found no solutions, except to invent the things that are needed to give the appearance of a workable model. The second and more likely universe from Einstein's field equations was an inhomogeneous anisotropic universe. This is a spherical universe with a center, thus allowing for a stationary Earth to occupy that center, which would have fit nicely into Hubble's initial interpretation of the galaxy redshifts that put Earth in the center. As physicist Paul Davies has said it, quote,
"As we see only redshifts whichever direction we look in the sky, the only way in which this could be consistent with the gravitational explanation is if the Earth is situated at the center of an inhomogeneous universe."
Interestingly enough, this inhomogeneous version of the universe was also developed by Father Lemaître, alongside his homogeneous Big Bang universe. This same inhomogeneous version was later developed by Richard Tolman and Hermann Bondi, and a few others. So, all this history just begs the question, how is it that this perfectly viable geocentric model of the universe, developed by the same priest who helped develop the Big Bang model, is given no recourse in popular science, then or today? The most likely answer to that penetrating question is that modern man doesn't want an Earth-centered universe. To be perfectly honest, it smacks too much of God. As physicist Paul Davies once said when in 1975 physicist George Ellis developed a geocentric model of the universe, quote,
"His new theory seems quite consistent with our astronomical observations, even though it clashes with the thought that we are godless and making it on our own."
So we are left with a hard question. Did Father Lemaître choose the Big Bang Copernican model over the geocentric model, even though he knew the geocentric model was scientifically viable and was taught by the Bible? It certainly seems that he did. Perhaps he was coaxed into accepting the Big Bang model because the secularists of the world didn't want a God that was so obviously behind the no chance, no extended time, no evolution model with which geocentrism naturally associates itself. Although there are many other modern-day physicists who have also discovered the geocentric model from both relativity theory and advanced Newtonian systems, such as Lyndon Bell, Barber, and Bertotti, and J. Nightingale. The few we have mentioned are sufficient to show that modern scientists not only know about the geocentric model, they know it is completely legitimate from a scientific perspective. As such, it is modern science itself that makes the geocentric model completely viable today, as well as the Catholic Church's censoring of Galileo 400 years ago. The only thing Trent Horn has to do to come to this place of wisdom and knowledge is to open up his mind. So please pray for Mr. Horn